Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, The Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 hooper and current teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids.
And I'm Omari Senko for the second, Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And as YouTube user asked, are we starting early? We absolutely are. We did change the time around just a little bit. Wes is a little bit behind right now. He's dealing with some new home ownership stuff, but to get Shawn on, he has some stuff going tonight. So we started early. I was able to start early. O2 was able to start early. So if this messed up your chance to watch us live, we're sorry. Hopefully that allows some of you to watch us live. And as always, make sure you're watching Wes and Blake Silverman over on the Detroit Bad Boys YouTube channel with the pin down. Make sure you're reading Omari and Shawn on the Detroit Free Press. And while content may slow down a little bit, make sure you're checking out the Motor City Hoops Substack. I will have some second round draft prospect stuff coming up once we get a little bit more into that. I know I've had some people reach out to me about that stuff as well. But as you can see, if you're watching live or after the fact on YouTube, or as you're about to hear, we are joined again by our guy, Shawn Windsor. Shawn, how are you doing today?
Not too bad. Good to be back.
Okay, let's get right into this. We're going to talk a lot about Trajan's presser. We're going to talk about that. We're going to take the quotes, use it as a way to talk about the offseason. But first, I had a chance to go live after the Game 6 loss and talk about the series as a whole, all of that. O2, you haven't had a chance. Obviously, we haven't had Shawn on yet. So O2, I'll go to you first. Give me your biggest takeaway from the series against the Knicks solely from the Pistons' perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest takeaway is that they're here. Like, they're a legitimate team. They literally were within 2 possessions and like a missed call, like maybe taking that in 6 or 7. And, they should have no doubts that, the core that they have, the coach that they have, is something that they can go forward with. Like, I don't know if they have anything to solve this offseason the way that they have had to over the last few off seasons. This works. Cade's a star. You have a lot of guys around him who have improved and could step into even bigger roles. So I think it's confidence. I think it's like we held our own against a 3 seed, a 3 seed that just knocked off the Boston Celtics in game 1. And we're here, and this is something that we can sustain.
All right, Shawn, same question to you. You were there for a lot of those games in person. We had you on. Your biggest takeaway from the Pistons side?
Yeah, I was there for all of them. That there's a competitive. You know what my biggest takeaway is, and we can talk about this later in the show. I think the NBA is going to start changing here. The way it's officiated, the physicality, the way it's played, and watching that series made me think more than ever this team is set up to take advantage of what I think is going to be not a radical new NBA, but a little bit of a different NBA the next 5 years. And I think we saw that play out. I mean, I agree with everything Omari said. Yeah, Cade's a star. We also kind of figured out what everybody's got to work on. And my last quick point is Asar Thompson's coming.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought up Asar. Also, I agree with you. I do think Detroit, the way they play, the way they're put together. It'll be interesting if Trajan dives even more into that kind of style and those type of players and all of those type of things. We'll talk about that from his presser. Real quick, both of you, it doesn't have to be real quick. Take as much time as you want. We're in no rush here. O2, other than Cade, who was the player you felt like you had the biggest takeaway from? Could be positively, negatively, could be like, we saw that this player absolutely has to get better at this thing, or this player was better at this thing than I thought he was going to be. Who was the player that kind of stands out? When you think back to this series, it's like, that player stood out to me for this reason. Who was that for you?
Yeah, I mean, we just mentioned them, but it's Asar. Like, if you're talking about players where the game just shifts when they check in, like Cade and Asar were the guys who had the biggest impact for the Pistons, to the point that where they probably won game 5 because Asar was so involved. And I think Duran deserves a shout too. Like, just his passing, I think, was also extremely key to the Pistons offense working with Asar in it. But yeah, Asar's defense and just everything else he brings, like, he was, he did a lot of what, Josh Hart did for New York, but I think along with that, like, obviously even better defense.
It's funny, as some people know that follow me on Twitter, I'm moonlighting for Knicks Film School right now. That Detroit is out of the playoffs, doing some Knicks video breakdowns, and I did one on Josh Hart after game 1, and somebody tweeted about it to me, and I said, yeah, there's something about the Pistons finding their Josh Hart. I said, they have their Josh Hart. It's just hopefully going to be a supercharged version of Josh Hart with Asar Thompson. Shawn, you can rave about Asar as well if you want, or if you have another player, since we've talked about Cade and Asar, somebody that maybe stood out to you.
But just real quickly with Thompson, to me, what he can be is the going to work version of Ben Wallace, right? Or frankly, the Warriors version of Draymond Green. I mean, I think he's got that kind of potential. Anybody that follows the Warriors will tell you, as great as Clay has been, Draymond's the second most critical player of that run. And that's what Thompson looked like to me in Game 5 and Game 6, like that kind of future and potential. But I go back with Omari with Duren. The way Duren played after Stewart went down, the responsibility he had, knowing who the back, knowing it was going to be him and Paul Reed. I just thought the compete level, and we can get into this a little bit later with what Langdon had to say today, but about Duren. But the compete level he showed to me in this series, that even the rim protection was, I mean, he gassed himself. You could see, right? I've not seen him push himself quite like that. And he got better competitively as the season went on. But for that, 2 through 6, I thought he brought a different level of intensity that he's shown since he's been in Detroit.
Yeah, Trajan's quote on him is really fun. We'll definitely get to that because I know it validated what I saw this season. That made me feel a little better about it. Michael says, as Omari has often said, Stewart is going to be a playoff guy. Such a shame he got hurt so early. I agree. That was one of my biggest disappointments, not really seeing him in the playoff setting. And then obviously J.I. as well. My guy Harry says, what up, though? Appreciate you, Harry. He helps me over on the Motor City Hoops Substack. I know he has stuff coming this offseason as well. Both guys over Order of the Blazing Horse will have some stuff over there. All right, let's get into the Trajan press conference today. And guys, we have a whole lot of stuff to talk this offseason. We'll be able to talk targets. We'll be able to talk second round draft picks, big names, all of that. We'll see where this goes based on the Trajan presser. I want to start with one of the first comments he made, though. And Trajan was asked what allowed last season to click faster than expected. This season, he said, the guys buying into their third coach in 3 years. I thought that was interesting perspective, Shawn. 3 coaches, 3 years for some of these guys. Buying into the system. JB taught them from day one the defensive side of the ball, the unselfishness on the offensive side of the ball, playing with force. What were your thoughts on that? I guess that gives us a chance to kind of talk about, JB Bickerstaff, who didn't win Coach of the Year, but was right there. I think he finished second. Trajan finished, what was it, 02, third in Executive of the Year? Is that right?
He was third, and he was like right behind, I think, Kobe Ottman for second.
Yeah. So, Shawn, just the job JB Bickerstaff did as Trajan outlined it there with the culture, the defense, and these young players specifically buying into their third coach in 3 years and really buying into what JB preached.
He did a phenomenal job. I think just his energy, him having their backs after last year, and what he did this a little bit in Houston. He definitely did this in Cleveland. Just he starts with defense, right? I mean, to me, that's what changed from last year to this year more than anything is the defense and the compete level. I thought the compete level the last couple of years, part of that was because of injuries and so forth, but he brought a defensive intensity and a compete level that they absolutely bought into. And then they saw from him on the sidelines. And that's also good to me, going to be an issue for him. He's got to learn to pick his spots. You guys probably saw the quote from Mike Breen, the play-by-play for the New York Knicks, who does the national broadcast too for the NBA in the playoffs, who said in all his years, I'm paraphrasing, in all his years of calling games, he's never seen a coach complain so much. Maybe you could say there's a little bit of homerism, but I think of Breen, because he's in that capacity, he's a Knicks guy, but I think of Breen is a fairly objective guy. Ty Lue said when the Clippers were here and the Pistons beat the Clippers back in, was that January or Mario? I can't remember. He said, hey, I love JB, but he's going to have to start picking his spots. So we didn't talk to Langdon about JB today. We were talking about the players and where they can get better, but JB can get a little bit better too. That's right there. And then if you want to talk about bench and Asar, strategic decisions too. But I think the bigger issue to me is picking his spots on the sidelines.
Yeah, really interesting thing with him. You love the emotion. I think sometimes it's one of those things where if you want the emotion and all the positives, sometimes there are some negatives that go with it. From personal experience, this may surprise people, but I'm a very emotional coach. And I would often tell my players, like, you can't have one without the other. Like, if you love me whenever I'm going crazy and emotional and excited and all this energy, there are a few downfalls that come with it. But especially in the NBA, Shawn, I think learning how to handle officials and talk to officials and pick your spots is a real part of playing that game. O2, your quick thought, like, what do you think was the thing that impressed you the most about the coaching job JB did this season?
I mean, I think there's a lot. I would say number one is just the transformation on defense, which, and a lot of that's like some improvement from the players and the players maturing, but that's also, I think, a system and effort stat as well. And, this is a team that have been weak on the defensive end, for a lot of years. And, he got them to truly buy in, and they got better as the year went on. Asar coming back really helped that out a lot. But just, you look at the fact that Asar and, Isaiah Stewart were not like the highest paid guys on this team at all. Like, those were their top two defenders, but a lot of it also was guys like Cade, J.I. before he got hurt, Duran, as the season went on, got better, like everybody kind of stepping in and maintaining that to the extent that they can. I thought Tobias was pretty good, a little bit underrated defensively this season, and we saw that a lot more in the playoffs. So, a lot of that's coaching. I think that's just setting a certain standard. And it's like Trajan said during his press conference, he's their third coach, but he got them to buy in.
All right. So let's go to this next thing where Trajan, opening comments, hell of a season, acknowledge it changes expectations for the offseason, which has more positives than negatives. I want to get your guys' perspective on this. I feel like we heard Trajan make the comment multiple times throughout the season, Shawn, that he was surprised at how far the team came this season. I think it gives a chance to think about that, but also I want you to reflect on where you thought this team was going to be this season. How much further did they go? How much if at all, does that change your thoughts coming into this offseason?
I think like everybody else, they went a lot further. Right? I mean, Omari and I were in New York one night, kind of just like, are we really sitting here watching the Detroit Pistons? Right? I think was it game one or game two? I maybe probably game one, but
it was one of those. It's like, it's like you walk in and you get to the media room and it's like, okay, yeah, we're about to watch a playoff game in 2 hours.
Let me ask a media question real fast. I've got to do this a little bit. Only regular season games, summer league. Is it different for you guys, Shawn? Like, is it different for you? Is the atmosphere crazy different? Is there double the amount of media? Is the security more? Like, is there a vast difference in a playoff game from a media perspective? Purely what you're trying to do is your job. Is there a major difference from a regular season game?
Oh yeah, I mean, especially at the Little Caesars, the presence was quadruple. Omari, I mean,
yeah, and I think them playing in New York is a big part of that too.
No, for sure.
Was the food still as good though? Was the food? That's all I care about.
Yeah, it was still as good. Like, honestly, they might have stepped it up a little bit more.
Okay, all right.
It was a few more options.
They might have been showing out a little bit. No, but Bryce and Omari and I were sitting there thinking they won 14 games a year ago. And as game one went on, and then they came back and won game two. From where they were a year ago to watching this compete level, then you see the Knicks knock off the Celtics. You start, I would have liked to have seen that series. That's a different subject, but yeah, I didn't see that coming. I knew they had some talent. I remember right now when Weaver got let go that I thought he'd done a good job putting talent in and or bringing some talent in. It just, he had good spacing and the vets and the right coach and all that. But it wasn't like they didn't have any talent a year ago. And Langdon and Bickerstaff both have been very clear about that, right?
O2, what are your thoughts on that? Just in terms of, like, it always kind of surprises me a little bit that Trajan will readily admit the team. Like, my takeaway was always Trajan wasn't expecting to be a buyer at the deadline. And now I know he essentially did both because he acquired draft picks along with Dennis Schroeder, but it didn't seem like he was like, hey, I need to go get a piece to help us get to the playoffs, which again, that was another move that really paid off. But what are your kind of thoughts on just like the exceeding of expectations? Because we're about to dive into the offseason. We're going to forget all of that. Like, the idea of this team going from 14 to 40, whatever win, that's going to be way in the rearview mirror very, very soon as we look at ways to improve. So I want to get your kind of like final chance to express, I don't want to say you're surprised, but like how impressive it is, I guess, for lack of better, I think anyway. I think we all agree it's extremely impressive.
Yeah, like in general, you're never going to be in a boat where you're like, I think this historic season is about to happen when nothing historic necessarily took place preceding the season. And obviously they had a lot of changes behind the scenes. You bring in a new coach, you bring in a mostly new front office. There were, a few people that carried over, including George David, but beyond that, a lot of new faces. But you did have the same core, like Cade's the main guy. I know Asar, Isaiah Stewart are guys that Troy lobbied for, and, they're core players this season. Before he got hurt was great. So the ingredients were there. It was just everything else that, I think kind of fell by the wayside. And, were they 14 wins bad last season? They were 14 wins bad. Like, that's what the record says. And it doesn't matter. It's tough to say why they were that bad and why it was that bad. But long story short, Trajan came into a scenario where he didn't have to draft a core, which like you're at the beginning of a rebuild. You're kind of coming in despite the record. It's more of like a midway point. And yeah, for JB to be the head coach and, free agency, obviously, THJ, Malik Beasley, who they got on a great deal, Paul Reed, who they carved out cap space for by waiving and re-signing in the middle of the season. And then that enabled you to go get Dennis Schroeder. And then Ron Holland, obviously being the 5th overall pick. Like he's done everything right, at least on paper so far. Like you inherited a good scenario, but you still have to play the cards right. And like he's played his hand very well so far.
All right, so the next one, Trajan said there's still more to learn about the roster when asked if it's time for a big swing. Mentioned Asar not having an offseason while dealing with blood clots, Duren improving after his first 25 games, players getting healthy. If those guys take steps, we get better. I want to dissect each one of those first, Shawn. Do you think this offseason is the time for a big swing? We don't even have to say the names. We don't have to say, I think a lot of people would agree that a shortcoming was a number 2 offensive option behind Cade. Do they need to go out and potentially leverage future draft assets and some of these young guys, or should they wait? What are your thoughts on that in terms of this offseason, coming up in the next couple months?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. Look, I get it. They're ahead of schedule a little bit, right? You go 14-44 and you compete the way they did against the Knicks. And that could look even better if the Knicks somehow take the Celtics to 6 or 7 games, right? But they don't know what they have. Langdon said that today. They've been very clear about that. And there are good reasons they don't know what they have. They just don't. So why would you make a move and give up anything when you're not sure what you've got yet? Bryce, you made this point back in the winter. Look, I get it. Teams aren't going to hit on 5 picks. They're not. But what if, Cade, they've hit on, all right? I think they've probably hit on Thompson. We don't know what he's going to be. But what if 2 more come? What if they get 4 out of 5? That's a championship contending team in 2-3 years, maybe 3-4 years, whatever, right? So I would at least give it till the trade deadline next year, probably next summer. If they take a step back, yeah, whatever, that's frustrating. But then you have a better idea. All right, is it Holland or Thompson that we need to keep? You know what I mean? Or do we need to upgrade somehow at the wing? Is Ivy and K, are they really compatible? They kind of look like they were, but you're not sure enough, I don't think. What's Ivy going to be after his injury? Duren took a big leap. He's 21 years old. People have this idea. You go watch him and people have this idea he doesn't have any skill. Omari will tell you after being at practice for the last 6 months, there's skill there. Will that be able to translate to a game? I don't know. He's 21. What's he look like at 22? 23, 24. That's what they have to sift through to me. And what's the rush? Why does it always have to be all or nothing? They're not going to, maybe they get Giannis. I don't know. Right. But are they going to win a title if they go get, I've heard somebody ridiculous idea like Zion Williams for 2 first-round picks, one of either Holland or Thompson. I wouldn't trade Asar Thompson straight up for Zion right now. You're talking about if he's a Ben Wallace type of guy, that's a Hall of Fame player who affects winning in a ridiculous way. Anyway, I'm sorry I'm getting worked up about it.
You're good.
It's just frustrating. What do we have in sports? If there are 30 teams in every league, 32 teams in some league, you're going to go generations without winning a title. You got to find something else that you take joy out of. And the journey's got to be part of it, right? It can't all just be, I got to have everything right now.
Yeah.
This is a huge problem in our society. I'm sorry I'm getting on a soapbox.
No, go. But, we love it.
But no, absolutely not. See what they've got. And then next year.
It's a little easier for me because I'm not a lifelong Pistons fan and stuff like that. What happened in Game 4 was actually one of the most telling, and then how Detroit responded in Game 5 was actually the most impressive thing they did all season to me. Because they got screwed in Game 4, and they probably got screwed because they're the Pistons and not the Knicks. And there's this, whatever. But the way they handled it and came back and went to Madison Square Garden and won the game, I feel like, I think we all agree with this. Like in sports, honestly, in life, there's certain steps you have to take, and you kind of have to earn those type of things as you go. And I think that's what you're trying to say here is why try to skip 3 steps when you might have all the dudes to just take 1 step and then the next step. And it may not be linear, right, Shawn? Like they may plateau next year. They may lose the first round in 6 games again next year. That doesn't make next year a failure if you find out like, hey, you know what? Ron Holland might actually be the number 2 option on this team 2 years from now. And now we don't have to trade 4 first-round picks to get him. So go ahead.
And then you go get Pascal Siakam or whatever, like the Pacers did. I mean, you know what I mean? Think about it. I'm sorry, Amari, real quick, because I'm writing about this for tomorrow. Think about Indiana's a good example. They made Western Conference semis and the back-to-back conference finals with a team they largely drafted. Like their best players were homegrown, right? Paul George, Lance Stevenson, Hibbert they got on a draft night trade, but that's to me more or less kind of a draft, right? The core of those guys, now, obviously they drafted Kawhi and shipped him off, and I'm sure that they, would love that one back. But that team, and then they saw what they could do. They weren't quite good enough to beat the Miami Heat with a super team. Okay, fine. Then they started they flipped George for this Sabonis, who eventually turns into Halliburton, and now they're rolling again. They that's fine. But when you got a homegrown, see what you can do. And then if you got to start leveraging those guys and somebody wants out, whatever, right? That's almost always the way you win in this league, unless you are the Lakers.
Tweet House says 2 things. Progression is never linear. Could not agree more. Second, how many guys in the league have Pistons fans said, wow, we gave up on him too early? I agree.
Chris Middleton.
There you go. Chris, it's everybody's favorite.
Going back further, Aaron Aflalo.
0-2, we are going to come to you, and we're going to get your thoughts on this right after this quick break.
All right, we are back with segment 2, and just go ahead and throw the question back at me, so I'll make sure I hit on the same points. Although I could not make my point as energetically and vigorously as Shawn did.
I'm juiced up that Shawn got into. I appreciate all of that Shawn said. So essentially, do you think that because I will be honest, guys, I've let my mind wander to this just a little bit this offseason, and I got to rein it back in. No, we don't know J.I. yet. We don't know Holland yet. We don't know Asar yet. It's going to be okay. At least I'm with you, Shawn. Lockstep deadline at the earliest next year. So Amari, big swing this offseason, or we can get into the smaller move conversation some other time. Are you big swing or in or out on that?
Yeah, no, I think you are just now entering the window where making a big swing is even like a conceivable thought, right? Like Trajan kind of said that earlier, but he was like, like a year ago, like that was like this ridiculous notion that, we would ever make this big swing. And now you're just now getting here, so you don't need to get rid of that window immediately. Like Shawn said, if you get a Giannis type, then okay, that's probably worth investing in. But otherwise, you still can't even really value your team properly yet, just because guys are so young and haven't played much ball. You can't properly value Asar because he's played not a whole lot of basketball. He hasn't had a proper offseason of development yet. You can't properly value Jaden Ivey. You can't value Duran. So I feel like at least until next trade deadline, you just need more information. This is only Trajan's second year. He's still learning about these guys, and I think he learned a lot this year, but you're not all the way there yet. So yeah, I mean, if it's Giannis, if it's Luka, okay, yeah, maybe you call the war room and hash it out. But otherwise, you're probably not going to be in the mix for a player that's even worth having that conversation for.
I want to ask a real quick question on this topic, and then we're going to go to the Asar and Jalen Duren portion of the quote. Shawn, do you have any worries about this team essentially running it back all together? There is a path that they could bring back all of Beasley, Tim Hardaway, Schroeder. They could essentially have the same rotations. I know you have to add J.I. into that. That changes it a little bit. Or do you think at least looking for an upgrade on those guys or changing it up a little bit is something that would you be at all nervous of it being a little bit stagnant, bringing back almost the exact same top 10, 12 guys? Or do you have no worries about that whatsoever?
I think I would run with Harris again, unless there's a deal that's going to involve his money, because they're still young and the way they look to him. And sometimes you see that, right? A player gets taken out and it's the loss is a lot more than just what fans see on the court. And it sort of dominoes and ripples. And to me, Harris is probably that guy. Beasley's tougher, Hardaway Jr., Schroeder. If that's where I would look, can I get a little bit better in a couple of those spots? I mean, you're going to be hard to match what Beasley did, but Beasley's going to be hard to match. Is he going to really make that many threes? Maybe he will. maybe he's found a home and he feels good. He's got roots here, his family, his grandmother, all that, his mother, sorry. Maybe that leads to that. But yeah, I would absolutely be open to making moves on the margins with some of those guys. The other real quick thing is I think if that's what if that's what Langdon and Bickerstaff want to do, Gores would be open to that. He would go into the luxury tax to do that. So I think that's a pretty good sign for the future.
I know people are saying, like, good points here, Keith. Interesting is next year will be a new team if they run it back. Chuck says Ivy means you're not stagnant. I agree. Like, I'm mostly saying essentially you're going to have all the same voices in the room, all the same vets. Like, I just think at times new blood, a new voice, a new personality can be good. Like, it would make me a little nervous. I agree with all of you that the roles would change a little bit because you're bringing Ivy in, Asar off an off-season where he was able to actually improve all of that. I get it. Oh, let me ask you this real quick and then we'll move on. If I told you could get 80% of Malik Beasley's shooting, but somebody that's better defensively, how enticing would that be to you?
How much better defensively?
Not like an Asar, not like an all NBA level defender, but not just like a neutral defender, like a good defender, a good perimeter defender.
I think you think about it at least, right? Like, because I also think about.
So then the name that's interesting is like Nickeil Alexander-Walker.
Yeah.
Like, can Nickeil Alexander-Walker, like, what percentage of Beasley's shooting is that? But then he's better on the other end.
Yeah, I mean, hypothetically, if that type of guy is out there, I think you have to at least think about it. I also think Malik Beasley's body of work as a shooter, counts for something as well. And he may not shoot 300 threes and do it at like 42%, but he might give you 275 on 39%. And I still think that that's good enough. Just having that gravity next to Cade, that, that means something. So if Nickeil Alexander-Walker, you get him on a comparable deal to Beasley, then sure, if you're going to have to, pay some more money and then that cuts into your ability to maybe retain Schroeder or, some other guy, then, I still think I value the shooting that Beasley brings pretty highly.
All right. So, Shawn, next part of this quote was Asar not having an offseason while dealing with blood clots. Like, this is a huge part of it in terms of what can he be like. So where do you want to see Asar grow? Like, let's take the shooting out of it because I think it's unfair to say, hey, Asar shoot 38% on threes next year or something like that from the corner. If I just tell you, hey, he's going to be the same shooter for the next 3 years, let's throw that away. What would you love to see Asar come back next year in terms of his all around? Maybe it's something defensively, maybe it's something offensively. What do you think would be the biggest area of growth for him?
His handle.
Yeah.
I think his handle, because I think with that speed, explosiveness, quickness, however you want to describe his ability to get that point A from point B, which only one other person in the league can do, his brother, right? And his brother has a little better handle, so you can kind of see what that looks like, right? So to me, if he improves his handle a little bit, and then I think that the finishing will come along with that, because you improve your handle, but the finishing gets a little bit better, right? You can work on both. I saw his brother in game 7, maybe pull up from the elbow. He quick speed dribble into the lane, pull up, kind of turn around, square shoulders, almost like Kobe-esque. I don't know if he'll ever make that shot consistently, but if he can score in the lane a little bit better, from a few feet, how many times do we see against the Knicks where he get the ball down there and it wasn't a dunk or a layup, and he needed to score some way from 4 or 5 feet and really had no shot, right? The handle will help with that. So those two things, I think the defense is just going to get better and better and better, where he's going to start vying for the defensive player of the year with his brother,
I mean, I think the thing with Asar also is I think he's going to start getting better whistles. Like, he just didn't get a good whistle. The best defensive players, watching Draymond with the Warriors, he just gets a different defensive whistle than other people do. And that comes with time in the league and whether people agree with it or not, I think it's just part of it. And so I think the foul trouble and some of that stuff will naturally work itself out as he's going to be talked about in that light. I mean, over on Game Theory, Sam said it. I mean, Isaiah Stewart and Asar would be in the all defense conversation if either of them had the games played to do so. I know Isaiah has the game played. He doesn't have 20 minutes of games played to be eligible. So, O2, your thoughts on Asar Thompson this off? I'm sure it's a conversation we'll have a lot. But again, I want to throw out the shooting because I don't know that he has to shoot it. It would be great. I agree with Shawn. And going back to his rookie year, O2, he used to dribble into a 10-footer, jump higher than everybody else and knock knock it down. We didn't see it as much. So what do you think in terms of, hey, this would really open his game even more next season?
I'm going to go against the grain. I still think it's shooting.
No, you can't answer shooting. Get out of here.
I think it's shooting. I think,
well, then Fred Vinson's going to get a pay grade if this happens.
Yeah, hey, you never know. There are guys who have figured it out. But my thing with a star is that, for somebody who doesn't have, like the greatest handle, like I still feel like he's pretty productive, at getting, like he would get, like I think his whistle will improve as time goes on. Like initiating contact's not something that's really an issue for him. And, I think it's fine if he's more of a north-south driver. I think the key for him is just the, defenders not playing 3 feet off of him. If you could at least knock down a couple jumpers, at least get to like a Josh Hart level to where you have to think about it. I think that'll open up a lot more for Asar. I think it'll make it easier for him to not have an advanced handle because he's probably taking 2 dribbles before he gets to the paint, and it'll help him at the free throw line. He shot like 62% or 64%, at the free throw line last season. Like if you could get that up to like mid 70s, like I think that goes a long way. He doesn't have to become like an amazing shooter, but I think if he can become a workable shooter, like a passable shooter, combined with what he's already doing now, that'll just open up the rest of his game.
He becomes a shooter from range. He's going to be the best player on the team.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, like I'm. Like,
I know
like,
it's
I'm,
crazy
like,
to
I'm not
say,
saying he's gonna be Clay. I'm just saying if he can.
No, you're talking about Kawhi.
Not even Kawhi. I'm saying if he can become like even just like 34% from 3 on like enough volume that you have to at least think about it. Like Josh Hart volume. Like Josh Hart's not like an amazing shooter, but if you leave him open enough times, he will make you pay. Which he did against the Pistons a few times. If he can do that, then I think that opens up a lot. He's a better athlete than Josh Hart. I think he will be able to see the floor a little bit better. Like there's a lot that I think that a slightly better, like a much better jump shot, but not, like Klay Thompson level jump shot will open up things for him.
All right. Well, like I say, I'm sure there'll be plenty of Asar Thompson, Fred Vinson shooting stuff all off season. I want to get back to Jalen Duren. We got about 5 more minutes of Shawn here, and you've already touched on this a little bit. This was a very interesting quote from Trajan to me. It was probably I don't always get into these, but this was the one that stood out the most because I feel like Trajan's pretty like matter of fact. Duren improving after the first 25 games. I was like, okay, this makes me feel better about what I saw this season because 25 games into the season, I remember what I was saying on this podcast that, you know what, maybe they should send Jalen Duren to the bench for a couple games and let him watch how Isaiah Stewart and Paul Reed play and then put him back in the starting lineup and see if he learns from it. Obviously, that didn't need to happen. The improvement, how hard he played, all of that stuff was able to happen without having to do that. JB played it out right. And I feel like we saw him get better throughout the season. And like you said, Shawn, even in the playoffs. Again, I will quickly reference Sam Vecini is not a huge Jalen Duren guy. Over on Game Theory, he thought games 5 and 6 were the best he had seen Jalen Duren play in his career and was very impressed with that. And I think that's what's the most important, Shawn, is in the most high leverage situations, we saw growth, we saw improvement, we saw impact.
Absolutely. I have a few thoughts on this. One, and this kind of relates a little bit to Jaden Ivey, because Trajan also said at the season-ending press conference that he didn't realize that Ivey could shoot the ball like he did, right? And he also said that he liked the way, because he started playing defense too, and we've forgotten that because it's been a while. I mean, he wasn't a lockdown guy, right? But he was starting to get up into people a little bit and using his incredible physical gifts to do that. And it's what I think about with Duren. There are a few things to me with Duren. One is, and this is how it relates to Ivey, there's this sense that the team took off when Ivey got hurt, and that's not true. They were 5-2 in Ivey's last 7 games, and he won them a couple of games, right? At Sacramento, he was good against the Lakers on that trip. Was decent. I know Cade had a great game at Phoenix, but Ivey was part of that. Langdon even referenced that he won a couple of games today. That to me, what really started was Duren's elevation and Thompson then getting more minutes, right? So Thompson coming and slowly getting off the minutes restriction, and Duren called himself out. You remember this, right, Omari? He basically said, I wasn't manning up out there. I don't remember the exact phrasing, but it was along those lines, right? Yes, Bryce and you and Sam, and I understand looking at the technical parts of how he can defend and his weak side and the way he defends ball screens and all that. But he got better because he started trying at a grown man level, right? At a different level. He started competing, and then you can learn from there. If you don't compete, I don't care what kind of technician you are, right?
Yeah, no, I agree.
That's what changed. And then the last thing I'll say is this whole idea about a stretch four. Okay, fine. That's great. But you know what? To me, the Los Angeles Lakers would still be playing if they had a vertical threat. If you put Jalen Duren on the Los Angeles Lakers right now, they might be in the second round because of the rim protection he showed in 5 and 6 and a vertical threat for Luka. And that's what's critical to Cade. It's not just the perimeter spacing, right? He's got to have vertical spacing too. And Duren is one of the best in the league.
Yeah, I agree. There was early in his career, there was every 5th game, it seems like you could clip something of him getting beat in transition, right? Like the other big would just rim run him and beat him, and Duren kind of acts surprised. My biggest gripe with Jalen Duren now is the stretch big stuff. I still think at times his sense of urgency in that isn't great. And then there's some ball screen nuance things. But what we saw was recovery blocks, recovery rim protections, off-ball rotations. Those are all extra effort type of defensive playmaking. And I can live with that, especially if you're going to surround him with really good wing defenders, right? Let's just say Asar and Ron pan out, right? Let's say this all plays out in a perfect world. If you have Asar and Ron on the defense on the wing, and Cade and J.I., who Cade is already a neutral defender, if not better, J.I. is on his way to neutral, I don't think JD has to be an anchor of your defense type big. He can just be good, solid, raking down defensive boards. And so I was really impressed with where he grew this year. That's all you want from guys, right? Is growth and improvement. So O2, your thoughts on Jalen Duren and kind of the growth throughout the year.
Yeah, I mean, I agree on all those points. I also just say his rebounding, I think is something that gets taken for granted because that's something he's really been great at from day one, but especially against the Knicks, they just got destroyed on the boards whenever Duren wasn't in there. And I think having Isaiah Stewart healthy makes up for some of that. But the other part of it is just that, when teams have size advantages, like the Knicks have, 2 7-footers, there are some rebounds you're going to give up. But, with Duren, he was grabbing 3 offensive rebounds a game. And that kind of goes into the effort aspect of it too, just the amount of second chance points he had. You combine that with the passing, the way he was able to consistently find a star on rows, he found shooters a few times. There's just a lot of stuff he does that adds up. And yeah, it's like Shawn said, if you could just become a capable defender, not like Dwight Howard, but capable defender, like a guy like Steven Adams. I think we saw how important Steven Adams is for Houston. And, then that's a guy, good passer, good rebounder. I think Duren has some of those same traits. So yeah, I think in the playoffs, we've found his path to being an effective NBA player. And I think he found it. And that's something that he can grow from.
Just from Bo last quick thought. Yeah. His passing on the short roll, it's a 2-pronged thing, right? The chemistry with Cade for the vertical spacing on the lob, and then, or if he's getting off the double when Cade gets blitzed on the short roll, and then Thompson cutting on the baseline because he's got such a great feel for cutting into that space. And Duren turns and looks, right? He doesn't he's not Jokic, but he turns and he looks, he keeps his head up. He's looking for those cutters, right? That's not easy to do because it's up to you to make the play at that point. And he showed a lot of growth, I thought, there.
Yeah, I was intrigued with his passing going back to the pre-draft stuff. And whenever he gets a chance, I think, especially in the half court, O2 knows this. I don't love the grab and go stuff. He passed the ball to Cade or Asar, let those guys dribble it up. But in the half court specifically, I'm cool with it. Shawn, I want to get you out on this. We haven't got a lot of Cade Cunningham conversation, but Trajan said on Cade Cunningham had an incredible year. Stats-wise, he was fantastic. He got better, but he hadn't driven winning, and he was the driver of winning for us this year. That's the biggest and hardest step to take, turning your stats into being meaningful and driving winning. I want to ask you this. I've said, I think we all agree, maybe you don't, that Cade Cunningham can be the face of a franchise. He can be the best player on a title level contender, a true playoff contender. Is there any doubt in your mind after the season we saw, after what we saw in the playoffs? I'm not saying there's no area of growth. We know there's area of growth, but is there any doubt in your mind, or where are you at that Cade can be the best player for this team for the next 10 years and help be that guy that takes them to playoff contention with the right guys around him?
Of course he can. I mean, I think what we saw from the Knicks backed that up. He did it in 2 of the games. Down the road he's going to need to do it in 4 or maybe 3, and Ivy does it in 1. I don't know, however you want to break it down, or Thompson makes the defensive play to get the stop. The Warriors have won plenty of games with not just Curry making the shot, but Green getting the stop, right? I mean, seen that over and over. So no, I think what we saw from him, and I asked that to Langdon today about Cade, about where he could get better. That was part of his answer. The other part of his answer, because was after driving the winning, was where he can improve. And he pointed, Omari will tell you this, he pointed to conditioning, didn't he?
Okay,
he said
interesting.
he needs to get into elite shape. And I wrote this a couple of days ago. I was trying to write about what each player needs to do. I think he needs to tighten his handle just a touch too. And you could maybe say that the shape, being in shape and conditioning and getting a little stronger will lead to all of that. You're not as tired, you handle the ball better. You're a little stronger, you're not as tired, you finish better, right? You know, he struggled. He looked gassed at the end of game 6, I thought. And a little bit even at the end of game 4. And I think part of that is that atmosphere at Little Caesars, which was so crazy, drained him even in a way that it didn't at Madison Square Garden. So it's elite physical shape, but there's a mental aspect that goes with that too to me. And I'm with Langdon. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. He gets into better shape, like elite. I think he used the phrase elite shape, right, Omar? That he gets into that. Everything else flows from there, tightens up that hand a little bit. Then the decision making is easier because you're not as tired. You know, then he front ripped so many of those threes because he didn't have any legs, right?
You can see it. I've watched every second of Cade Cunningham's career. This is going to sound arrogant. I feel like I can tell whether he's going to make his three-pointer or not as soon as it releases his hand, because it starts to come out a little bit flat.
It does.
And you don't see quite as much lift, and you're like, that one is online, but it's going to hit the front of the rim. And then a lot of the other ones, either he makes it or it hits the back of the rim. And I feel like you can tell pretty quick, but that leads directly into conditioning. If a shooter doesn't have his legs, it's going to come up short a lot of times.
Yeah, no, I would say if he gets there, everything else comes out. He's already got the size. He's got the basketball IQ. He's got the swag. He's obviously got the skill. He's got all those things. You put elite conditioning and all that, and he's just going to keep getting better and better. And he's pretty good already.
And on the defensive end, right? Because that's one thing I always like to bring up with him is Chuck brings up a really important, and I think this plays right into it, and then we'll let you get out of here, Shawn. Chuck says, I think training for a summer where the kids are starting to understand what playoff basketball requires has me geeked for next year's progression. This is why this is important to get into a playoff series, right? Now Cade understands. It's one thing for whoever's training him, Ashton or whoever, to say, Cade, you were at 85% of your best. You got to push to the next 15% when Cade's never experienced it. Now Cade has experienced it, Shawn. He knows what he felt like at the end of game 4, at the end of game 6, and now he can remember that going into the offseason and help that motivate and drive him in terms of his work. So I think that's really good stuff. I know we got to get you out of here. Thank you so much for joining us. And obviously we'll have you back on soon, breaking down what else they can do in the offseason, after offseason moves. Any final thoughts?
Just Langdon said it. Omari heard it today that talking about Cade. And I think this applies, and was it Chuck who just mentioned that? This applies to all of them. When they're in the workouts this summer, they're trying to get in shape for the second, and I think Langdon even said this, the second round of the playoffs. That's what they're trying to get in shape for. That's different than trying to get in shape for, hanging out in February. You know what I mean? And that's the key. So yeah, it's all right there. Yeah, get better around the margins. If there's some ridiculous deal, if Dallas calls up and said, hey, we'll give you Luka, fine, maybe. I don't know. Maybe the Lakers are going to have to rebuild their team around him now, right? So that's going to take a while. But anyway, sorry for the digression there. But no. That's the thing. Spend the summer thinking about May.
Love it. All right, Shawn, thank you so much. We'll have you back on soon. 02, we're going to go to break. When we come back, I think we'll just talk some general NBA playoffs for the final 10 minutes or so. See you, Shawn. Have a great night.
All right, we're back for segment 3. And let's talk playoffs.
How much have you got to watch? This is interesting to me.
Oh, I've been tapped up.
How much did you get to watch first round stuff? Did you get to check the first round, or was that so
Yeah, so first round was spotty, especially towards the end when the Pistons had a game every other night through, games, I think 3 and 6. It got a little tough, especially with travel in between, and, we grabbed dinner on the road, a couple times. It became tougher to watch that. But since I've been home, I've been tapped in because the games have been so good. Like I may be doing something else and I'll just have a game on in the background and then it'll be like 5 minutes left. And it's like, oh, like this, like they were down 13 or 18 or whatever. And it just became a game. Like the Indiana Cleveland finish was insane.
Okay. Hold on. Let's go through them one at a time. So let's stay in the East for now. The Cavaliers sweep the Heat 4-0. I don't think that was shocking to anybody. Indiana beats the Bucks 4-1. I think, especially with the Dame stuff, which shout out to Dame. Hopefully he's, recovering from the Achilles and all of that. I don't think that was crazy surprising. But now we have the Pacers up 2-0 on the Cavs. Last night's game was wild as Cleveland goes into that game without Mobley, without Garland, without Hunter. Donovan almost drops a 50 bomb. Here's what I want to say. Tyrese and Pascal weren't the heroes of that game. Aaron Nesmith and Miles Turner were the heroes of the Pacers game until the fourth quarter and kept them close enough for the late game heroics of Siakam and Halliburton and the craziness of that. So your thoughts on that series where all of a sudden Indiana now looking like they go back to the Eastern Conference Finals?
Yeah. So, I mean, shocking to be up 2-0. I think definitely saw that as a series that could go 6 or 7, but for them to take both at Cleveland is shocking. Although obviously the injuries in game 2 played into that as well. But I'm just really impressed by this Indiana team, like how well the pieces all fit together. Like I think Miles Turner is just such a perfect playoff
He's been so good. He was so good in last night's game.
He does a lot of the same stuff you get from Brook Lopez, and like obviously we know how good Brook had been. It has been for Milwaukee. Halliburton, it seems like he's hit another level ever since the overrated claim from his peers, and he's hit two of the most ridiculous playoff shots we've seen in quite some time. Like just like they have shooters, they have two-way guys. The guard, Smith, Nembhard, Nembhard has been he's a really good playoff performer, and we saw how good defensively he is. Since he gets the Cade assignment more often than not, but you could combine that with him knocking out threes. They're just a really well constructed team, a really well coached team. Yeah, it's just been crazy to see how well and connected they've been so far.
They're actually honestly fun. I know a lot of Pistons fans don't like the Pacers. They don't like Halliburton. I get it. I understand it. Just as a fan of basketball in the NBA, I do enjoy, they have a lot of fun possessions where the ball is moving and popping and all sorts of things. But Aaron Nesmith has been really good to me. I think he's had a great playoffs. He's a really good two-way player. And so that's been a lot of fun. I think that series, this is going to be interesting for Cleveland. I was looking at my before the season predictions for the general NBA over on Game Theory. And one of the things I said was I thought Cleveland was going to have to trade one of their big four. Obviously, the regular season was way too good for that. But what happens if they lose this series? What if they get swept 0-2? You can't tell me there's not a chance they get swept when they're going back to Indiana down 0-2. Now, I'm also saying there's not a chance they come back and win the series, but what do you do then? You tried the coaching change. You had a healthy season. Now, the argument right now is Darius has missed 2 games and Mobley has missed 1. So we'll see how that plays out. Obviously, Knicks beat the Pistons and then the Celtics beat the Magic. Quick shout out to the Magic. They made that series competitive at times because their defense is so good and Paolo and Franz are incredible. They just got to figure out a way to score the basketball otherwise. And then the Knicks, down 20 in the third quarter, find a way to come back and beat the Boston Celtics in overtime. How much of that game did you get to see, and what are your thoughts on that series?
Yeah, so I pretty much saw all of that game, just because, one, it was going to be a good game, but also just super curious to see how the Knicks looked in a different environment, right? You watch this game, you watch this team intensely for 6 games. You learn a lot about them, and then it's okay. True. So let's see, how they problem solve Boston. And I mean, for Brunson to just do what he did against the Pistons again, and I know he got off to an unpopular start with the foul baiting, but he also is just a genuinely insane shot maker in clutch scenarios. And some of the shots he hit in that game, along with just again Michael Bridges making big plays, OJ Anunoby making big plays. I don't even know if Cat had an amazing game.
No. Cat was not great in this game. To be Brunson went on the crazy stretch. Bridges and Anunoby are kind of being these two-way wings they traded for over the last couple of games. And again, I did the breakdown on Josh Hart because I thought he was incredible. Cat wasn't great. The other guy that wasn't good in the Pistons series was Deuce McBride. I think he at least had 11 points, so he made some shots for him. But it wasn't a Cat game for sure. 0-2.
Yeah, but I think we saw the same thing we saw against the Pistons, which is that OJ OG and Miles Bridges are both pretty legit number threes, and they can both kind of, take on the onus of making the big defensive plays and hit like hitting the big threes as well. Like, Cat's been very hot and cold throughout the playoffs, and it hasn't really affected them that much because of how, like OG more so against the Pistons, but Mikal Bridges, like, won that game for them in overtime. Like, he just completely took over. So, yeah, long story short, just really impressed by the poise that the Knicks had. I think some of that was the Celtics. I mean, obviously, they were like 15 of 60 from three, which probably won't happen again. And they had taken a little bit more time off, so maybe it was just some rust there. But super impressed by the Knicks. Like, that was one of the grittiest wins of any playoff team.
Keith brings up Pacers-Knicks in the conference finals would be a great lead to the rebirth of the NBC era. Yeah, I spent a lot of weekends watching Knicks-Pacers games. All right, let's go to the West here to close it out. Thunder sweep the Grizzlies 4-0. Obviously, the jaw injury that made him miss, the last game and a half when the Grizzlies were up like almost 30 at halftime in the game. He goes down. OKC is able to come back, then win a tough game 4. Nuggets Clippers go 7, and the Nuggets win that. And then the Nuggets come in, still won from OKC late in the game. Again, I don't know how in depth you can go on some of these. I don't know how much you got to see them, but that series is really, really interesting to me. Obviously, you have SGA versus Jokic. Sounds like SGA is probably going to win MVP. I would have voted for Jokic, and I think Jokic is the best player in the world.
I did vote for Jokic.
Oh, good for you. Let's go, O2.
Yeah, I did vote for Jokic. So
I also want to say real quick, what happens in the series does not matter for MVP. If the NBA wants people to take the playoffs into account, they should wait to have the voting till after the playoffs are over. It is a regular season only award. What happens in the playoffs does not matter. Just want to throw that out real quick. But, I mean, the Nuggets, how about Russell Westbrook, like, being a very much a contributor to what they're doing? Aaron Gordon has been incredible. I think Christian Brown has been underrated as part of this as well. And then, obviously, and David Adams, O2. The Nuggets fired their head coach and their GM like 3 weeks ago and, up 1-0 in the series, obviously game 2 tonight.
Yeah. OKC, for as dominant as they were in the regular season, they looked like a young team that couldn't match the intensity level that was needed for the moment in game 1. And Denver is, of course, those guys have won a championship. Westbrook's probably played like 200 playoff games by now. You have very few guys in that rotation who are not battle tested on some level. It's a very mature veteran locker room, and that's why they've been able to withstand the firing of the coach and the GM, because, they still know what to do on the floor. They have Jokic putting up 40 and 22 or whatever he had. And OKC, they're really deep. Like, they're talented. Obviously they just had one of the best regular seasons ever, but they looked like a young team in that game. And I think they just have to figure out if they could summon that same intensity level, because for whatever reason, they just lack for them down the stretch. You could talk about some of the individual unclutch plays that happened, but collectively for them, they just did not step up.
It'll be interesting to see how they respond in game 2 tonight. That'll be again a really fun series. The Pacers Cavs series was actually the series I was most intrigued by. I just thought that'd be a really fun competitive series. Hopefully it still turns into one. This was second. And then the final series, obviously Timberwolves Warriors, where Steph Curry scores 13 points in 13 minutes, hurts his hamstring, I believe it is. And the Warriors still beat the Timberwolves in a game they were up by 20, I think, multiple times. Buddy Hield, after a Game 7, just incredible performance to knock off the Rockets. Obviously, the Timberwolves beat the Lakers in 5. Hield comes into Game 1 of this series, has another really good game. Draymond, I think, hit like 4 threes in this game. Anthony Edwards had like 1 point at halftime or something. Just a really weird game all around, O2, especially with Curry going down. Sounds like he's out for at least a week here. So Golden State's going to have to, I think they play day off. So what they would play he's at least going to be out games 2 and 3, maybe even 4. So Golden State's going to have to find some offense, but I was kind of impressed with Minnesota after the Lakers series, but that game 1 was a little rough.
Yeah, again, they just didn't have the intensity that they needed to have. And it's funny because Steve Kerr went so deep into his rotation, to keep guys fresh, but also just because they had such a big lead for most of the game. I can't say I was expecting Braxton Key minutes, but, shout out to Braxton Key for, checking into a playoff game and able to maintain that lead. So, yeah, Jimmy Butler, we could talk about playoff Jimmy. Obviously, he's a guy that is going to make big plays, but it was just the poise they had down the stretch. Very clearly a team team that is used to operating in those moments. And Minnesota, I mean, they've had their own playoff success too, but I think some of that as well is like, this is still a new team in the sense that, you know, they have a hierarchy. I think they're still figuring out in the wake of the Julius Randle trade, and nobody really stepped up. You know, they didn't seem to know where to look when they needed to settle things down and like get some offense generated. So, like, I don't think that game was indicative of the entire series. Obviously, with Golden State not having Steph for potentially the next 3 games, you know, that puts them at a disadvantage. But yeah, Minnesota did not have the intensity that they needed, and that's probably their biggest priority in game 2.
YouTube user says Pat Spencer. Yes, shout out Pat Spencer with a really nice performance. So, final things here. Shawn says, should the Pistons try to get Naz Reid this summer? What do you think? We will probably do like an episode where we talk about all of these guys. Just real quick reminder to everybody, if Detroit goes the cap space route, they can get to about 19-ish million, roughly around there, once Cade makes All-NBA. To get to that number, you essentially have to renounce everybody in terms of Beasley, Hardaway Jr., Schroeder, etc. And so then you can only sign those guys with either cap space or the room exception. So if you're going to bring in a Naz Reid via free agency, that would be something that's always important to remember, that with these outside free agents that are going to take substantial contracts, that you're probably not going to get all of those guys back. Maybe one of them on the room. Of course, you could do a sign and trade or something like that, which obviously get a little more complex. Finish off with this question from our guy, Michael. Regarding the playoffs in general, do you think teams are going to lean into being bigger going forward? Seems like size is winning. What do you think, O2?
I think talent wins. You know, I think you can analyze trends from every playoff, but you know, generally, you know, I think the teams that not only have the most talent on both ends, but also stay healthy tend to win. You know, I don't necessarily read into, you know, season by season trends as much. Like, I think it's good. Like, size is good in general, you know, especially when you have guys who are versatile and can handle things on both ends. But, you know, I think a lot of the playoffs have just been decided, honestly, by tough matchups. Like, we just saw Denver and the Clippers go 7 games. Like, there's been a lot of really close series, and there's been some injuries as well. So, like, I just think the playoffs are so noisy. It's tough to make those types of assumptions. But in general, like, yeah, when you have guys like Jokic and, you know, other bigs who are dominating you know, you're going to need some size.
Yeah, I mean, I think my thing is teams are going to try to be as big as possible, but not without skill, though. Like, they're not just going to take size for if there's no skill that goes along with it. So Keith says the Pat Spencer skyhook was amazing. That was more disrespectful than any dunk I've seen this season. That was an incredible shot. So Wakanda Forever says Nas is going to command 25 plus million. Unfortunately, yeah. So that, like, the other thing is, if you want to get to like 25, now you're trying to find a way to dump Fontecchio's contract or something like that. Caleb, this is fun. What shows are you guys watching? Anything you'd recommend? Amari, you got anything? I actually have something. So
I don't have anything. I only follow a handful of shows at once. I watched season 1 of Succession like 3 months ago. I've not got to season 2. I did watch Invincible like a month or 2 ago whenever season 3 of that ended, so I really enjoyed that. But currently, I'm not the guy to go to for recommendations. I'm just now getting off season though, so I might pick up something over the next week or 2. So we'll see.
Yeah, usually I'm not either, but Ranny got me into The Pit, which is like a ER hospital movie in Pittsburgh, or not movie, a TV show. I don't know if it's on. I don't know. Is it on Amazon or Netflix or one of those? I don't know which. She turns it on and I watch. Yeah, so Michael says, Bryce, The Pit is phenomenal, and I don't usually like medical shows. Can be very graphic at times, so just be ready. Yeah, Michael says HBO Max. There you go. So I haven't enjoyed it, though. It's really good. I think we have 2 episodes left. Like, we're right in the middle of like the very intense stuff, but we'll get to it eventually. Probably not. Like, we start so many shows and then don't finish them, but I'm hoping we will this, because I have enjoyed it. And Caleb says also, thank you for everything this season. Y'all made a great season even better. Thank you guys again. I know we both, you know, I tweeted out like, you know, I think it was 93 games this year, whatever it was with preseason and all of that. And just, you know, thanking everybody for, you know, taking in what we do and all of your articles, O2, all of these podcast episodes, everything we put out, subscribing to the Substack, all of that stuff. We truly do appreciate you, because, like, honestly, if you guys didn't watch the podcast, if you didn't listen to the podcast, if you didn't rate, review, subscribe, I'm sure the Free Press would pull the podcast, and then we wouldn't have anything to do. So if you didn't read Amari's articles and go over to the Substack and all of that. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Obviously, we're into the offseason now. From now on, it'll be those type of conversations. It'll be a lot of fun. It will be much different because we haven't talked NBA draft once, Omari. I think the NBA draft lottery is like on Tuesday. I don't even know for sure what day it is because it doesn't matter for Pistons basketball. So
I never know what day it is.
Well, that is true. So on that note, let's get out of here. Thank you everybody for watching, listening, subscribing, rating, reviewing, all of that. Appreciate you so much. O2, take it away, my guy.
Yes, as always, big thanks to our audio producer, Robin Chan, our editor-in-chief, Dakota Avery Nichols, and big shout out to Wes Davenport, and we'll talk to you all next week.